I have been typing up the sheets that the new staff filled out in terms of their expectations, and common theme, I want to know what to do when. And we hope that you can walk out of here. You're not going to have every tool you need. You're not going to know how to handle every situation. Nobody knows how to do that. But hopefully you walk out with a few tools, and we're going to try to literally help you to remember them through the stuff that we put on your table, so that you can have a better chance of responding effectively to children who may present challenging behaviors. We're not dealing with a typical population. That's something I think we all get in our heads, but when we first kind of get immersed in the environment, sometimes it can be a little overwhelming because they're not acting the way that I thought they were supposed to, and all the other kids I know don't act like this. And some of them are wonderful and are great, and then suddenly it changes, and some of them are difficult, and then they improve. And there's just no way of knowing. So our goal is to give you guys a few tools that'll help you be more effective more often in dealing with kids who present us with challenging behaviors. So the first thing we're going to do, though, is really give you some background. How did these kids get to the point where they are? One author uses the term children from hard places, which is, I think, a very good term because it encompasses a lot of different things. Marcia, who's coming up, is going to talk to us about trauma, which all these children have experienced, by definition, at least two major traumas in their life. One, abuse or neglect. Two, being removed from their family and being placed in a foster home. Both of those are traumatic events in the lives of young children, almost as bad as losing your name tag over and over again. And so Marcia's going to talk about trauma, the impact of trauma, and kind of do an introduction to something called Tbri, Trust-Based Relational Intervention, which really we're going to operationalize into tools you can use to work with your kids. So, Marcia, take it away.
Good afternoon. Hello. Hi, Marcia. Okay. Hi, Mom. Well, let me just give you guys a little bit of background of how I got to be up here, why I'm up here. I started Royal Family. Yeah, I'll get to that. So I started with Royal Family Kids Camp. I went the first year 10 years ago, since we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary. And I was going to be the photography assistant. And I was scared. I was like, I don't want to do anything with kids, just photography assistant. And as we said in the morning, we need to be flexible. God has a plan. And a counselor got sick, and I ended up going and becoming a counselor. And so from that moment, I left camp impacted, went back to school, changed my major from pre-med to social work. So definitely God has a plan for us here at this camp. And so I just want to let you know that in the morning we talk about the new staff and the returning staff, definitely know to be flexible because God does have a plan at this camp. And so if we just submit to Him, He'll work through us. So the section I'm going to cover several sections, but we're not going to use the material right out of your binder, covering Understanding the Camper Section 3, so I encourage when you do read through the binder that you pay attention to Section 3. I'm going to talk about what is trauma. So, what is trauma? And I'm just waiting for this, the slides will come up in a little bit. But basically, trauma is an experience that can produce feelings of us feeling emotionally or physically harmed or threatened. So that's what trauma is. And as John said, and I'm sorry, there are PowerPoints on the back of your binder if you do want to follow along and take notes. There are PowerPoint handouts. So what is trauma? So trauma is an experience of feeling emotionally or physically harmed or threatened. It could be a one-time experience. It could happen over a period of time. And so the children that we're dealing with have experienced trauma in their lifetime. They may have experienced one incident of trauma, or they may have experienced several incidents of trauma. Being removed from their family is traumatic. And so if you go into examples of trauma, trauma can result from neglect. Neglect is failure to meet basic needs. You can also experience trauma through abuse. There's emotional abuse, there's physical abuse, there's sexual abuse, and also loss. So sudden loss of a loved one. It could be through illness, through death, loss from your family when you're removed from your home, placed to a foster home. So that's very traumatic for children. And also abandonment, is a form of trauma. And also community violence. We don't think about it, but exposure to violence. So children who are exposed to domestic violence or just community violence can also experience trauma. And so I want to talk really about the impact of trauma. We know that the children that are coming to camp have experienced trauma, but I really want to talk about how that impacts them so that we can understand who our campers are, and we can have a better understanding of the children that come to camp. Trauma creates changes in the neurochemical makeup of our brain. So our body has 3 natural responses to stress when we perceive danger, and that's fight, flight, or freeze. And so what happens is when a child or a person is exposed to trauma over time, their stress response becomes stuck, and it becomes stuck in one of those 3 responses. So that's fight, flight, or freeze. And then we also know that exposure to trauma also affects the neurodevelopment of a child, especially if they're developing, their brain is developing, and so they experience trauma. We know that there's a physical impact to the makeup of their brain. So that results in a change in how they feel, a change in how they interact with others, a change in how they learn, how they think, and how they process the senses of what they see, of what they smell, of what they hear, of the things of taste. So trauma has a physical impact, not only emotional, but a physical impact on the children that are coming to camp. You'll see that there is a picture of a PET scan. Just to see the physical impact of trauma, you'll see on the left-hand side a picture of a PET scan of normal development in the brain of a child, and on the right, you'll see an image, a PET scan of a child who experienced extreme neglect. And if you can see highlighted in the circles, there's low to no activity in certain portions of the brain. That's actually the temporal lobe, which regulates emotions and receives input from senses. So you can see that there's low activity, so there's an actual physical impact of trauma on the brain. On the next slide, you'll actually see that there's less neural connections. On the left, it's a typical child. On the right, it's a child who also experienced neglect. And so you'll see that there's less neurochemical connections in the function of the brain that oversees language. So you see that there's actual physical impacts that actually will impact our kids. Next slide, trauma harms the brain, but nurturing and trusting relationships can help heal the brain. So that's the hope that we have. That trauma has this physical impact on our children that come to camp, but we know that there's hope and healing. What's our response to this? Our response is that the children we serve, they experience changes in their bodies, their brains, their behaviors, even their belief systems. Trauma impacts belief systems, and it requires caregiving that needs to be unique to meet the needs of these kids. And so we need to create a response when we're responding to our children that is going to create an atmosphere that is going to be loving and nurturing in order to be a healing agent. We need to be mindful and aware of how we respond to the children that come to camp. We need to be intentional that we're not triggering or re-traumatizing our children. And so because of that, we are going to, last year we introduced trauma-informed care at camp. This year we're actually introducing trust-based relational intervention. And so it's a way to respond to children that is, it's a manner to respond to children. It's attachment-based, it's trauma-informed, so we're responding to children with this mind that trauma impacts them. And so we're gonna respond in a way that is appropriate. And it's also evidence-based intervention, meaning there's been research, there's been studies that actually show that this is an effective manner to respond to children. It works in different areas, so we have evidence to know that this works. So the foundational principles of TBRI, I'll call trust-based relational intervention, TBRI, is that we understand where the kids are coming from. Second, we connect with the kids. Third, we empower the kids to be able to correct themselves in an appropriate manner. But we also have to correct poor behavior, but we also acknowledge the history of abuse and neglect. And so we're going to watch a video right now that really introduces what TBRI